I am going to start a thread in the industry channel of questions to ask. Don't think of. I'll also start sharing. Perfect. Working?
Yeah, it's good.
If that guy that was needing ammo is here, I got it on market now.
Epic.
Just a question: is this a roam fleet for the gate camp or for the other stuff?
Both.
Okay.
It's for both because they wanted to listen in. So
Yeah.
the recording will have some crazy shouting noises if it jumps into us.
Okay.
May switch to roaming. Fair enough. So I had laid out a couple of things that I was going to talk about that are up on screen now. I'm going to go through those. If anyone has questions to know, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, like I said, I'm going to do this, outline, like I said, how to get started, make copies out of our BPO library, finding out best stations to produce things in our End Industry Worksheet tab, how T2 and T3 Industry works, using some of the tools, RavWorks and Lazy Blacksmith, configuring RavWorks for your skill set, figuring out a shopping list of things you need, stuff you already have, making sure you actually use stations, starting to use GVassets. GVassets is an enormous and in-depth tool, so I'm not going to do a ton of it, but I will show a little bit about how I use it, a couple of things, and then roughly how I figure out pricing. So I'll get started. The Corp maintains a fairly large blueprint library collection. This tends to be, I think, everything up to and including most cruisers. It's got most ammo types. It's got drones, a lot of the basic things you'd expect and want. So you can find that library by going in Industry tab, owned by Corp, and then you can either do all facilities, but generally they should be in this station, Smart Mataru, which is the tower in DTACO that is set up for invention, copying, research improvement, that kind of thing. So what you'll want to look at is, in here you'll find whatever blueprint it is you want. From that it's a blueprint original as opposed to a blueprint copy, and then you can make a copy of that. So if you decide that you want to make someone an Afterburner 1, select it, choose do you want to make a copy. The output location is the important part to get right. Anyone with the BPO user role, which is everyone once we've ticked a box, has access to this member area FFA hangar. You do not have access to the other hangars, so director, library, secure groups, industrial 1 through 3. But you can see them, and you can tell a copy to be put there anyways. So you can tell Eve to put this copy into Blueprint's library. It'll do so. You then won't be able to access it, and you'll have to ping someone who has access to that hangar to actually be able to take it out. The reason this is set up that way is so that people can make copies of the BPOs, but they can't steal them all and leave. So what you'll want to do is, like I said, choose member area FFA, choose your copy, how many runs you want, how many runs per copy. So don't get these two numbers flipped the wrong way around. I did that the first time and I ended up with about 200 one-run copies of something. The first number is how many BPCs you're going to end up with. The second number is how many copies that BPC will let you make. So this will be one BPC that would let you make 60 100 MN Afterburner 1. You can also use that, though, to do invention from, and that'll be come back to in a little bit. That's one of the reasons that you need copies. You also want them if you actually want to be able to build the ship. Where this library can be really handy is if you are trying to get into ship production. The ship BPOs are very expensive and take a long time to research compared to other blueprints. It depends on the size and scale. But we have a lot of them fully researched. So if, for example, you want to get into producing epithols for the market, you can do that. We've got copies available. Got a bunch of ships. We actually have up to battleship. So we've got blueprint originals for a ton of ships. So if there's stuff you want to make and you don't own a blueprint copy for them, or blueprint original for them, we've got them. You take copies from there, and then you can do your own manufacturing. So you can run off as many copies of the epithal as you want, and build them. Apparently, a bunch of copies already made, and then you could build those ships. Do bear in mind that when you start one of these jobs, you do tie up that blueprint original. So, say for example, you want to make executioners because they invent up into maledictions, and you want to make a bunch of maledictions. Okay, that's great. You're going to need a bunch of copies. In theory, you can make 500 runs of that, and you could do 20 runs and 30 copies, which would give you 600 copies of the Executioner Blueprint. That will tie that blueprint up for 11.5 days. That's based on my skill level. Yours will vary slightly. Generally, that is not appreciated. So, don't run enormous copies. If there's something you want, run 3 or 4 copies, 5 of them, something that takes a few days, and then see if anyone else needs it. If no one else needs it, then feel free to run another 5 copies. But if you are finding that you're continuously, then you may want to look at getting your own BPO for something. We do try and keep BPOs for things that people will use on a regular basis, and if you are finding one that we're missing, feel free to let me know, and we can look at getting that added in. You can also do improvement of those BPOs, so this is for both your own BPOs and also BPOs of the corporation. For the corporation, it's a nice thing to do if you have available science slots. There is a cost associated with it. The corp will reimburse your BPO improvement costs if you start expensive jobs and want to improve them. So if you've got a science slot you're not using, and you think, you know what, the Executor BPO could do with being improved, you'll have to lock it up for 17.5 days. It'll cost 4.6 million ISK, and you'll be able to improve from an 18% time efficiency to a 20% time efficiency, so it'll produce slightly faster. As far as improved BPOs, there's only one station that can do that, and so the next thing I wanted to look at was finding the best station to do your production in. So what you can do if you go to the Facilities tab is see here a list of, these are all the structures that we have access to. There is a corp that has given us access to their station. I personally would never use a station that belonged to another corp, but in theory we have access to. You can see here, though, what things can be done in those stations. Let these out if I can. I can't. Okay. So these columns are manufacturing, manufacturing efficiency research, so ME research, TE research, copying, invention, and reactions. If you mouse over them, you can see what kind specifically of whatever thing it is. So this station will do reactions, but it would only do the hybrid polymer reactions. I'm not going to go into details on specifically what those are. If you're just getting into reactions, the ones you're looking at are probably composite reactions. Those are the ones that are done from moon, goo, and fuel. So those ones are done in this moon station. And then we've got another station here, L8, which lets you do biochemical and molecular forging. So we've got 3 different stations that will do reactions, depending on the kind you. You'll notice here that people have asked earlier about the system cost index. While it's commonly discussed, what people are normally talking about is the system cost index for manufacturing. So this is basically the tax that gets applied to you manufacturing cost, sort of determining this number. It comes from the system cost index up there. That system cost index goes up the more a certain activity is done in a system. Now you'll notice that each type of activity has a different system cost index associated with it. And so it is specifically how much that activity is done in that system. But if we had put all of our manufacturing in one system, we would have had a system cost index that was spiking quite high. That was what was happening in 014, for example, because all of the manufacturing was done in that giant CTO. So finding the best station to do manufacturing in, because there actually are multiple stations to do manufacturing, there's two ways of doing that. There is a pinned post in Discord that links to... Let me find it. There it is. It's in the industry channel in Discord, but it lists out all of the stations that we have, and then also what rigs are in each of those. So you can use this and go look up specifically what that rig offers. So what does the stand-up LSET Advanced Large Ship Manufacturing Efficiency rig offer? It's Tech 2 battleships and jump freighters. But you can look up the name of this rig in the game to actually go and find out what it is that this is providing for. Service modules just says what the station can actually do. Rig says what it's good at. And then bonuses is just describing what it's actually helping. Other one, and this is less intuitive and less useful, but if you mouse over the type of manufacturing in-game, you can scroll down, and it will tell you what type of object it's providing a bonus for. Like I said, I don't find this approach particularly useful because some of this stuff is a little obtuse as to what specifically falls into it. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not. Forget where problems, but I don't find this list to be particularly helpful, but it's there. Easiest way to figure out where the best place to manufacture something is if you take a look at your own BPOs, BPC. So I've got a Tech 2 heavy assault missile BPC here. And if I mouse over this list here, I can see all of the different improvements that are happening to the material consumption for that. So the blueprint itself has an ME of 2. The structure provides a bonus of 1%. This Rotaru, and that's all Rotarus will provide a bonus of 1%. And this blueprint is providing a 2% one. But you'll notice there's nothing else in here. What you can do, though, is go to Facility. Basically try out the other ones. What you notice is up here, it's changing this and giving you a preview mode, very much like simulating for your ship. And you say, okay, if I built it here, would it be any better? No. If I built it here? No. Nope. Did I seriously pick one we don't have a benefit? I did pick one we don't have a benefit for. Now I find a ship. Yes.
A T2 module should be rigged in GD.
Yeah, that is a to come at some point upgrade. I swear that was not on purpose. There we go. Okay. So, for this one, what you'll see is that there's the blueprint ME, got a 10% ME, the structure provides 1%, and there is an installed rig that is providing a 5% bonus. So, I now know that this should be produced in NB ALM. What I personally would do is take these BPCs and move them to that station so I don't produce them in the wrong station by mistake. Sometimes it is not worth getting the efficiency bonus of producing them in the wrong station. For example, I was recently building a Tech 2 hauling ship, and the Tech 1 The Tech 2 one has to be built in this GC Tech system. The Tech 1 one technically should be built in a different system, but then I have to move the Tech 1 hauling ship, and that's just annoying. And since they're cheap, they cost nothing but minerals, and those minerals are not worth very much, I just end up producing it in the quote-unquote wrong station and taking a slight hit on the material cost because it saved me having to move the ship around. So this is where you find that information. You may or may not actually want to use that information, though. That's running copies for BPOs, best stations to produce in. You'll get used to what the best places to produce are in over time. Tech 2 and Tech 3 invention. Before I move on to that, did anyone have any questions? Cool. Alright, so invention. This was a discussion. We actually answered a lot of these questions yesterday on Discord overnight, which was good. But effectively, invention is the process of converting your Tech 1 BPCs into Tech 2 BPC. The Eve Wiki on it is actually quite well done, and so I'm not going to repeat the entire process. But largely what I'm going to look at are things that will actually impact and improve. So the skills you need are threefold to be able to do research effectively, or to do invention effectively. And they are some sort of racial one here. As we discussed yesterday on Discord, I have no idea how this was picked, but every tech has a race. I don't know where that came from. For the ships it makes sense, but for the other ones I have no idea. And then 2 other skills. The higher each of these skills you have, the more likely it is that your invention is going to actually succeed. Every BPC has a base chance of succeeding, and then your skills and implants will improve that chance. And then you can also put in decryptors that are going to provide different bonuses. You can mouse over these decryptors to see what those bonuses are going to be. So you can go through here and figure out what is actually what is it likely to do, or sorry, what will the decryptor do if I apply it to this BPO, this BPC, sorry. And so, for example, the accelerant one makes it 20% more likely to succeed. If it succeeds, you'll get an extra run. It'll push the ME up by 2, and it'll push the TE up by 10. And so then it's a question of whether or not that is worthwhile, and something you want to do.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Is those bonuses for the chance multiplicative or additive?
I believe they're multiplicative. Let me check. Yeah, so I'm at 37.9 without any modifier. And then if I add in the accelerant decryptor, I go up to 45.5, which...
Yeah, so it's less, so it's multiplicative.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So this is where one of the tools that I quite like for industry comes in, called Lazy Blacksmith. If you Google it, you're going to find Lazy Blacksmith. You can do some configuration on it yourself to set up things like your system that you're working from, what rigs exist in those in the station that you'll be using, what facility you'll be using, whether you're using a decryptor, what underlying skills you have. But what this lets you do is go through and see what are the chances that each of these will succeed, and you have to adjust them for your own skill levels. That doesn't save for some reason. So this should give us the same... Yeah, so that's the same 45.5 that I'm seeing in game. It'll show you what the resulting number of runs is, what the ME is going to be, what the TE is going to be. This is the cost for the invention, so this is taking into account, invention cost per manufacturing run. So this is taking into account the fact that, yes, the optimized augmentation decryptor only has a 34% chance of succeeding, so it's actually a little bit lower than not using one. But if it succeeds, you get an 8-run BPC out of it. And so it costs 20 million ISK to do the invention, but it's only 2.4 million per run. This output over here, product price per run, is one of the ones that I quite like. This is after factoring in the cost of doing the invention, how much is it actually costing to build the thing? So you can see here that if you want to make these as cheaply as possible, Huygens, if you want to make Huygens as cheaply as possible, you want to use the accelerant decryptor. Your cost will be 170,481,000. It would be, you could get higher run counts, for example, running the augmentation decryptor, but because you get a lower ME out of it, and the decryptor cost, and because it's less likely to succeed, it'll end up costing you per run by the time you're finished. This can be really useful if you're trying to do something like ammo, where, for example, I'm producing a lot of the hail and barrage large ammo. That stuff largely comes down to, I want to produce it the cheapest way possible. So when you first land on Lazy Blacksmith, you'll go in here. One of those comes from depleted uranium. Go in here. That is my push to talk, which is why that happens. So you'll have three options. One is invention, one is research, and one is manufacturing. Manufacturing is exactly what it sounds like. It's a basic tool for showing you what inputs are required to manufacture it. Research shows you how much it will cost and how long it will take to improve a BPO like this. And then invention is the section that I was showing. Here, and you say, okay, depleted uranium, if I want to make it, there's a base 34% chance. Adjust it from skills. Save. Don't. 49.58 is my default. So, product price per run. Now this includes the cost of actually producing the thing. So in this case, to make this ammo, the cheapest way is actually to do it with no decryptor at all, and just accept that there's a 49% chance of making it, and I'll get a 10 run 2 ME copy out of it 49.58% of the time. When it's finished, I'll have hail large ammo, and this is what it will take: 1 nuclear physics and 1 mechanical engineering data core. This is also why you find people who do T2 manufacturing will just gobble up data cores and decryptors when they show up, because you can chew through tons of these. This hail blueprint that you get, 1 run of it will make 5,000 units of hail, 10 will make 50,000. So I have a 49.58% chance of getting a BPC that will let me make 50,000 hail for every 1 nuclear physics and mechanical engineering data decryptor data core that I shove into this process. The BPCs are effectively free because I can just keep running them off. But yeah, the data cores and decryptors are the messier part to come up with. You can also use Lazy Blacksmith said to do quick and dirty calculations of how much something actually costs to make and what the inputs for take. And I'll show you roughly how to use it and also why I say it's kind of quick and dirty. So for the epithal, let's assume we have a 10 ME blueprint of it. Here it'll show what the base quantity is, the adjusted for the station I'm doing it in, and then that station's rigs, and how much is actually needed for the quantity I'm running. I'm only running 1, so same quantity. And then here it gives me these are all the materials that go into it. This is the installation cost, unit cost, and then how much they sell for in JITA, and how much profit you're expected to make on that item. The reason I say quick and dirty calculation is this doesn't break it all the way down for complex things. Tails here, let's do a Bifrost.
Ooh. Now I'm gonna realize I fucked it up.
So, because it's a Tech 2, we won't have a 10% ME, we'll have a 2% ME. We'll have an implant, we'll have some skills. The skills are, the only thing the skills will impact are the time that is involved. So your skills are never going to improve the materials that go into it, just the time. And so if you're only using this to see what materials you need, then this, I wouldn't bother with putting your skills in here, because all it's doing is telling you how much time it'll take, and that doesn't matter. So you can then go through and see here, okay, well I need construction blocks, morphite, RAM, plasma thrusters, LiDAR sensor, get a whole bunch of pieces. These are all construction components that I'm going to look at in a minute, and a Talwar. Great, 36 million. The problem is, Nobody's selling these in nullsec. People who have them generally make them. These get made from Moon. Now, you can in RavWorks say, okay, well, what parts do I need? If you want to make it, you'd need 68,000 ferrite carbide, 14,000 ceramic fibers, 1,300 fullerenes, so on. So this is what you'd actually need to make it. But this, I don't find is granular enough. Because again, I don't sell ferrite carbide, I don't sell ceramic fibers, I sell fullerenes. These get made from reactions. And so this is where Lazy Blacksmith gives you a quick and dirty calculation, but there's a lot of money to be made in manufacturing your own construction components and composite materials. And so that's where this tool can be less useful. So this is where you will start to potentially use RavWorks. Okay? So let's take the same example we had earlier. I want a Bifrost, I want 1 run, 2 ME. I'm going to add that job in. Right? Now, this gives you the ability to put in huge lists, so you can put in, I want 10 different ships, or I want a Bifrost and the whole fitting for it, something like that. I'm just going to do the ship because it's simple, and this already is a complex enough example. What this is telling me is that I would need to buy 74 million ISK worth of materials. When I'm finished, I'm going to have 47 million ISK worth of leftover stuff from the reactions I did that I didn't use. So I'm going to have 40 or 50 million ISK worth of stuff left over. And this is where having your own stockpile can be helpful, and where trying to do one project as a one-off can be really cost ineffective. The manufacturing cost is going to be about 2.6 million. And if I were to list it on the DTECO market, the sales tax for it would be 3.7 million. The JITA price for that would be 61.8 million. And the expected profit on it is 28 million. If I can also sell this 47 million ISK worth of stock, or if the ending stock is something that's actually useful. So I'll show what that means first, just so we can kind of get that out of the way. So here's a list of all the things you need and how many we're going to start with, and then how many we're going to end with. So you'll see that, for example, at the end, ferrite carbide, if you've ever looked at the reaction for it, produces in runs of, I think it's 10,000 at a time. And so you're going to end up with 2,423 left over, because you have to produce 10,000 at a time, but you only need, say, 16,000 to actually build the Bifrost. So you're going to end up with a bunch of ferrite carbide left over that you don't need. End up with ceramic fibers left over, fullerenes left over. If you're doing industry at scale, none of this stuff is a problem. I hold large stockpiles of all of this stuff on hand all the time, as do many people. If you don't do industry at scale and you just want to build a Bifrost, you're then stuck with this stuff, and that's the parts that you may need to sell at the end to move on. I'm going to open up a different view of this just to show the process, and then we'll come back to that. So RavWorks also has what it calls a tree view. This is for the visual people. So what this does is, and you can zoom into it, goes through and shows you a production tree of you make a Bifrost by taking in each of these different parts. Anything that's in green, that is the base component. So you don't make morphite, you get it. You get pyrite and titanium and all that kind of thing. These are all of the different parts and steps that are going into it to actually make the ship. So these are all of the things that you will use and the steps that you're going to go through to make it. So when when someone says, "Oh, can you build a Bifrost?" There's a lot of steps involved in building a Bifrost beyond just clunk, here's a ship. This is where you can do the actual tracking of that and look at, these are the parts that will be produced. So over the course of the production, we're going to have all of these things being produced. We're going to do 16 runs of a nuclear reactor unit. It's going to take 0.02 days. I have configured this for my skills and speeds. Your numbers will vary a little bit, but again, it's just time that will matter. It won't change the ME. You're going to produce 70 LiDAR sensor clusters. You're going to produce 1 Talwar. You're going to produce Fernite alloy. You're going to produce composites, all those kind of things. So Fernite carbide, you're going to do 7 runs. You're going to get 70,000. That's why you're going to have the 2,000 or 3,000 spare left at the end. What you can then do, and this is how you can actually plan your production, is take a look at this jobs to run section. This goes through and says, what are all the steps, jobs that I actually need to run? What I have told...
Point on Vexor.
Go ahead, sorry.
I got point on the Vexor.
Yeah, we are landing on the gate.
Let me know when it's dead.
That's fine. Can go on.
Okay. So, this goes through and actually tells you all of the individual jobs that need to be run. This is a relatively small job, and so it's not splitting it up. Let me make this bigger, actually. Tail comes to me and he says, you know what, I think I want Bifrost to be Doctrine, and I want 20 of them available. So, what I've done is I've changed this to say I have 20 Bifrosts I want to make. Now, this actually raises an interesting thing about how you configure RavWorks. This says that I have 20 one-run BPCs. They're each ME2. That says I have a singular BPC that is 20 runs and ME2 for Bifrost. That BPC is not possible, but it will, if you put that in by mistake, it will screw up the calculation because a 20-run BPC of something is more efficient to produce than 20 one-run BPCs of it. So if you're producing, like I said, you want to produce 10 Bifrosts, and you think, oh, well, I'll just make 10 Bifrost BPCs, 1 run each, and I'll make my Bifrosts. And you go and fill that out, and you put it in this way. Let me show you. That, what you'll end up with is Bifrost 10-2. RavWorks will do the calculation, assuming that somehow you have a 10-run BPC of a Bifrost with an ME of 2. That's not possible. In theory, if you had a BPO of the Bifrost, it could be done, but that probably doesn't exist, and so this is not possible. It will do the calculations anyways, and you will end up producing not enough of all the various mineral materials, and your stockpiles will be... So do make sure that your copies are correct. So now what we'll get, if I go in here, there we go. So what it's done now is I've told it that I've got 40 reaction slots. So this is spread across 4 tunes. Yeah, this is assuming I spread it across 4 tunes. So what I've told RavWorks is I want to get these jobs done relatively quick. And the intermediate composite ones could all be run in parallel. I've got 40 slots. So if a job's going to take more than a day, split it into multiple jobs and let me run it across 2 or 3 or 4 tunes so that I can get it done faster. So what I've done here is I need, when I'm finished, or is it Fernite alloy? I need 93 runs of it. That will take almost 7 days to do. But what it'll also do, what you could also do is have 8 runs of it, most of them 12, some of them 11, each of them taking under a day. It takes more slots, but it'll get done much faster. And so that's what this is doing. You can also compact this, which will tell you that you should do 5 counts of 12 runs, 3 counts of 11 runs, so on and so on, and list out all of these different jobs for you. So this gives you the building blocks to say, here's all of the things that you need, all of the steps that you need to do to actually make this work. Okay? And at the end, you will produce a Bifrost. You'll do 20 runs of it. They're 1 run each. The ME is 2. Each one will take 1.15 days, and then you'll be finished and you'll have your Bifrosts. One of the things that you will want to do is, remember we were talking about ending stock, stuff you have left over. If you start doing manufacturing at scale, you're going to have things left over. So let's say that we've got, when we start, say we've already got 300,000 Fernite carbide from something else we had previously. So in here, you can list your stocks that you have on hand. So I've got 300,000 Fernite carbide. What it'll then say is you started with some, and you ended with some, and you still needed to buy some more stuff. But what you'll notice is that it's taken out the production steps for making some of the Fernite carbide. Okay, I didn't look at how much we needed. Look, we have 3 million Fernite carbide now. So what you'll notice, it's now taken Fernite carbide out of the process entirely. So it's not making it. It's also not making the components that are used to manufacture Fernite carbide. And so what you can then do is go through and say, what stuff do I already have? Put that list into here, and then rerun the calculation, and it'll provide you a new calculation that says, what steps can you skip because of the things you already have? If you are doing that, what you'll want to do is start with the most complex things in here that you already have, input them, run the calculation again, and then take them back out.
We should be alright then.
And I'm not playing that kind of.
Nearest help miking on Discord.
Ah. Okay. So, like I said, start with the most complex things that you have and work backwards from there. So you'll notice, for example, that we need to make Fernite carbide composite armor plate. I can assume that the Fernite carbide we used was going into the Fernite carbide composite armor plate. So if I have both Fernite carbide on hand and Fernite carbide composite armor plate on hand, what I want to do first is just rerun the calculation saying I've already got this armor plate. So say I've got 50,000 of that on hand. So rerun that calculation, go through, it's come out of here, but also most of the Fernite carbide has also come out. So I don't need millions of Fernite carbide, I just need a couple 100,000 of it. And then what you'll want to do is, like I said, go through, add in stock of any of this stuff that you already have, rerun the calculation. See if there's any composite that you already have, add that into the stock. See if you have any intermediates, add that stuff in. And that will tell you when you're finished, you can go into stock and materials and see what's my shopping list? What do I actually still need to buy to be able to run this production? So I don't need any Fernite carbide composite armor. I have a whole bunch to start with, and I'm actually going to end with almost 20,000 left over at the end. This then gives you that shopping list of these are the things that I need to be able to manufacture these Bifrosts. There is one other step that you'll want to do when you're setting up your industrial setup. There is a file saved.
So the outlet in my closet, so you charge my.
Hey, I can mute. Perfect.
Well, he's not on. If he was in Mumble with us. Oh, he's now.
That was on
Nero. Nero. You are hot micing.
I've muted him on Discord. Okay, so all of these configuration settings are saved in a what's called a JSON file. That JSON file exists on the on Discord. Someone has saved. I think Zenti created a copy of it and saved it. What it does is goes through and says what kind of efficiencies do we have for different things. So large ships, medium ships, small ships, so on and so on. And he's put in that should be built in the right tower in NB, should be built in the right tower in NB, so on and so on. The part you will need to adjust for yourself, a couple of things. Approximate skill TE bonus. So this will depend on what your skills actually are as to how efficient you are. This will be able to mean that RavWorks will properly calculate how long it takes a thing to manufacture for you. The other thing that you'll want to look at is how many reaction slots and manufacturing slots do you have available to you. Don't split up small jobs. So if something's only going to take 4 hours to run, don't bother trying to divide it into 3 jobs. Don't run jobs that are longer than a certain amount of time. Again, this is up to you. And this one is one that I just find helpful. Select which materials not to build. So you'll notice in the production planner that it went and broke down most of the things into excruciating detail. It told me exactly how much chromium I needed, vanadium I needed, morphite I needed, all that. But it didn't just told me I needed hydrogen fuel block 708. But you manufacture hydrogen fuel blocks from PI and ice supplies. The reason it does that is because I've told it not to try and tell me how to build fuel blocks and tools. So those are the RAM, Starship, RAM, everything modules. And the reason for that is these two things I just keep on hand at all times in large quantities. So I just make sure that I've always got 10,000 fuel blocks on hand, and these RAM modules, I'll just build them 5 or 10,000 at a time. I don't want it telling me, oh, and also you need 600 oxygen to build the hydrogen fuel block that you want. No, I'll just have hydrogen fuel blocks on hand. So you can tell it to skip certain steps for you and just assume that you will have them on hand. Again, that's up to you as to which items you want on that and which ones you don't. While I'm here, I will take a look at the question I had on how I figure out my pricing for stuff. So what I'll do is I'll take a look at how much it costs to produce without any of the things involved at all. So I'd have to buy 74 million ISK worth of materials. I'd have to pay 2.6 million ISK worth of manufacturing costs. I then need to decide how much this ending stock is worth to me, because it's something I'll keep at the end, but it has to be useful. For something like a Tech 2 ship, the stuff I'm left with at the end is perfectly useful. I can use this to build lots of things, and I will probably have it on hand. So to me, that's worth whatever it says it's worth. So I'll subtract the whole value out. But if it's not useful to you, then you may want to go back and say, you know what, maybe I don't want to say it's worth 47 million ISK. Maybe it's only worth 30 million to me because I've got to sell it to somebody. So my build cost for this Bifrost is in the range of about 30 million ISK. I then have to decide how much do I add on to that. Could be anywhere between 10, 15, 20%, something like that. If someone says I need it rushed, maybe a little more, I'll add on some amount, and that will come up with a final price for me. What you can see is that Bifrosts actually are, assuming you can use this ending product, much cheaper to build locally than they are to buy in JITA. Okay. You're looking at, the game's calculation is about 28 million ISK profit, assuming the ending stock is useful to you. This expected profit excluding stock is saying, assume that this stuff is waste and just lost. Never do that, but calculate it that way if you want. You can also, in the advanced options, get RavWorks to actually do the invention calculation for you as well. So I can go through and say, I want you to calculate building me one Bifrost, one job of it, with no decryptor. And what you'll now see is it's added in a line for invention cost. That is very similar to the one Lazy Blacksmith did, of figuring out roughly I'm going to have to do about 2.29 runs to try and get a successful Bifrost BPC, and it's roughly going to cost me about 1.9 million. It's going to take me about 9 of each of the 2 data cores. And that goes through and does the whole calculation for you, and then gives you the same list of jobs that you Any questions about RavWorks before I move on to Jeeve Assets? Cool. Okay, so Jeeve Assets is a tool that you download and install. It can be very overwhelming. It provides an enormous amount of information and takes quite a bit of time to get your head around. I am doing it a disservice by only covering bits and pieces of it, but I'm going to show you some of the things that I do as far as tracking and how I find it useful. Again, if you're into industry, this is a great tool. You'll want to use it and learn how it works, but I'm not going to try and cover the whole thing. As expected, you go in, you auth all of your accounts. If you have alt corps, you auth all of them, that kind of thing. When you first do a download, you do an update. When you first do a download, it's going to pull in all the information that you have. This will include modules on fitted ships. This will include assets that are sitting anywhere, where they're located. You'll notice that in location, some of these are in gray. Any location that is publicly available information, so for example, the station in Jeddah, that one's known. And so Jeeve Assets, when you do the download, knows that this item is sitting in that station. These ones that are in gray, it had no idea where those were located. And what will happen when you first do the download is if you go into your Assets tab, which will be the one that's there by default, and type in unknown, you're going to find that it starts off with an enormous number of unknown location. You will want to go through and, for the ones you care about, figure out where these things actually are, and then provide a location to Jeeve Assets so that going forward, it can keep track of where that stuff actually is. You do that by right-clicking on the location, go to Locations, Location, Edit, and in here, you'll be able to enter the location name. This is just the name of the station. It'll ask you on the next screen what the system is. I don't know where this particular item is yet, so I'd have to go find it, so I'm not going to do it. But it'll ask you for the location name, so you'd put in the name of the station. It'll then, on the next tab, ask you for the system name. You'll put that in, and then it will no longer be unknown. So you'll then have this item is in DTEC O, Rebirth of the Wampire, it's in DTEC O, this is the constellation it's in, and so on. The only part of this that I'm going to show is stockpiles. This right now has a lot of stuff in it. I've done a lot of work to configure this and set it up. I'm going to show you a couple of quick parts about how I use it to do a couple of things, but it's again one of those tools that you really want to play around with to get used to. Commonly what will happen is someone will ask me, Baron, do you want X moon goo or not? I'm interested in it. So I've set up a stockpile. And what this is just a summary list of, or sorry, a subtotal of all of the items that you have and what your quantity is. So I've got a target for each of these raw moon goos. You can put in a multiple if you want, and then the stock that I have on hand in certain locations, and then a surplus or deficit. And you'll see that they're green if I've hit the surplus, or if I've hit the target, and they're red if they aren't. So if someone reaches out to me and says, Baron, are you interested in atmospheric gases? I can open it up and say, actually, yeah, normally I'd want to hold 250,000 on hand. I only have 180,000. So I'd take 70,000 more. Someone says, I've got 200,000. Sure. If someone says, I've got 1 million cadmium, are you interested? No, not really. Internally, I've figured out at some point when I had more time to think about it, that 29,000, I don't know why I picked 29,000 and not 30, 29,000 seemed to be a good number for me, and I've currently got 55,000, so I'm not interested in buying more cadmium. This is where that issue that people were discussing comes up, where someone says, well, I went into the valuation from moons, and I found the most valuable moon that I could mine, and it was Mercury. So I mined a crap ton of Mercury. Baron, do you want to buy my Mercury? Because Jeeve Assets says it's worth, 400 million-esque. No, I have zero interest in buying Mercury from anybody at any price. I have 300,000 surplus Mercury. I have no use for it. And so that's where you can run into a risk of mining something and thinking, oh yeah, this is super valuable. I'm going to make tons of money on it. But everybody does that. I don't need it. So maybe I'll give you 50% of its value, but I'm not generally interested in it. Now, hydrocarbons, happy to buy those, even though they don't look nearly as valuable. So, how do I do this, and how do I keep track of the parts that are relevant? So you're going to set up a stockpile, and then you can add filters to it. So this is looking in the station G3D ZT No1, and it's looking for things that are not in a container. And the reason for this, I'll show you part of my production, is what I do is, in RavWorks, once I figure out how much I need of something, I move it into a container for that particular project that I'm working on. So right now, for example, I'm working on a project to build some Claymores, some Hugins, some Redeemers, so on. In each of these are the parts that I'm already using. They're already spoken for something. In the main hangar for this station, I have everything that isn't spoken for. The atmospheric gases, that 180,000 we looked at earlier. There's the 300,000 mercury that we looked at. This is stuff that hasn't been spoken for in a project, that I could still allocate to something at some point in the future. So that's what this none is for. It's saying if the thing isn't inside a container, then I want to actually see it in this total list here as to whether or not Baron wants to buy more of whatever that thing is. So this lets me look at, do I have some of that raw moon goo? Do I need more? If I've got spare time for my reaction slots, what I'll start doing is pre-building some of the intermediate and composite materials. So I have the same stockpiles for the intermediate parts and the composite parts. I figure that a good stockpile of Fahrenheit carbide, for example, is 1 million units of it. Currently, I've got 0 spare. So if I have some spare time and spare reaction slots, I will just get tunes of mine to start building towards these things. They should be building, apparently, carbon fiber, ceramic powder, disparate, Fahrenheit alloy, that kind of thing. Because that way, for me, when someone comes along and says, Baron, can you build me 20 Bifrosts? I can build 20 Bifrost relatively quickly because I've done a bunch of these steps in advance. Now, you can use this to do that. You can do other things. You can use it to track whether or not you've got ships available on contract, things on market, doctrine, parts. I also use it, I can see, if I want to build the Sacrilege, for example. This hasn't been updated for the current stations, which is why all of it's missing, but this would let me go through and say, if I want to be able to provide 8 sacks at a moment's notice, which parts would I need to build to be able to do that? And tells me how many of each of those things that I have on hand. I haven't updated this yet for... No, I haven't updated this for our correct station. This is still before we move into the... So that's why it's incomplete. But that's what this is designed to track. Update that now. There we go. So this goes through and says, I've already got enough ballistic control systems, Valkyrie, EFFA Compact, Hornet ECs. But I don't have enough of the 1600mm steel plate 2s, Valkyrie 2s. So again, if I've got spare build slots, I may want to go through and build some of these. I don't have enough of the heavy missiles. The next time I'm importing stuff from JITA, maybe I throw in an extra 20,000 of each of the heavy missiles. Look at buying some of them. So these are the kind of things that you could use GV assets to do in its stockpile. It has a bunch of other tools as well that you can look at. I'm not going to go through all of them because, again, this tool has an enormous amount of depth to it. One thing I would caution, especially if you do mining, there is a worth tracker that gives you a little bar graph, line graph of your net worth over time. Be aware that if you are holding unprocessed raw moon rock, like the actual minerals, the moon materials themselves, not reprocessed, those numbers will be wildly inaccurate. And so don't put too much stock in that worth number. but it is there if that's something that you want to be able to look at over time. I think that's about it. I want to cover, and actually, hang on 1 hour. So that's perfect. Anybody have any questions? Cool. All right. Let me know if you think of anything afterwards. If you want to follow up on any of the stuff that I talked about, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap this up and get back to their blowing things up, building things. Good afternoon, everyone.
Information overload.
Thanks.
Just
That
slightly.
was really useful.
Thank you, Baron.
Thank
you very much.
I never use the stockpile stuff in GVSits.
It's
Yeah,
expensive.
same.